Milan Momcilovich is officially back, and the Cyclones are primed to make their run at the national title. We'll break it all down today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. A lot of recap today. We're talking about the past weekend of basketball, the men and their win over TCU, the women and their win over Colorado, and what impact does Milan Momcilovich have on this men's team? Do they have it all and enough now to bring home the national title? Before we get that far, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, let's just jump right on into the Milan conversation because it's what everyone's thinking about, right? Last Thursday, Friday, when TJ Otzelberger was on the mic, we talked about it on Friday. There was a question mark about whether or not Momchilovich would play. It was going to come down to if he feels comfortable, if he feels ready to hit the court. And I talked about it. Like it's very, we don't know for sure. He could, but also he's ahead of schedule. We want him to be completely comfortable. And then Saturday rolls around, TCU, pretty early game. And really, it came down to he played. We're going to put it that he does that. We don't have to get into the nitty gritty of everything that happened prior to that. Was he gonna? Was he not? What it came down to was TJ said in the post game, look, this guy just basically rehabbed like crazy, came back a little bit ahead of schedule, and we need him out there. And boy, do I agree. We'll talk more about the actual game against TCU in the second segment. But Momcilovich helps Iowa State to a win over TCU, 82-52. Let's take a look at his stat line in particular in this one singular game. Momcilovich, number 22, played for 22 minutes of this one. Went 5 of 9 from the floor, 4 of 7 from 3. Didn't shoot a free throw. Did not record any offensive rebounds, but did record 2 defensive rebounds. No assists, but 2 steals. Ends up with 14 points overall. Now, the main thing I'm looking at here when I'm looking at this box score in the Milan Momcilovich effect, because there's more than one effect, but the first one is 4 of the 5 starters for Iowa State had less than 30 minutes on the floor. If you compare that to weeks prior, Momcilovich has been out for, I believe, 7 games now prior to this one. Almost everybody was pushing 35, 36, 37 minutes. We had a couple 39s. Curtis Jones hit 41, I believe, in the Arizona game. These guys were getting pushed to their limit. Okay. How does Momcilovich affect this team? How does Momcilovich being back on the floor make Iowa State a national title contender? Multiple ways. Obviously, just mentioned it. The guys don't have to be on the floor as long, okay? It's just a literal fact. They don't have to get as, I don't want to say they have to get as tired because they're going to work harder in less time, right? So if you imagine the amount of tiredness stays the same, less time on the floor, that means higher effort, which is exactly what TJ Otzelberger has talked about. He is a big proponent of this almost hockey shift style type of substitution, especially with a team that's strong as this one is and as deep. Well, we've kind of seen that they do lack depth, but the way that they play together, they somehow have depth at the same time. I'm trying to keep this as straight as I possibly can here, get to the point. Point is, when you don't have to play as long, you go out on the floor and you go nuts. You're sprinting around, getting on the ball, making plays left and right, bang, bang, boom. All of a sudden, you're off, you're resting, and then you're back out there. We're seeing that in direct, like one game. We're seeing it in the minutes in the box score column. Secondly, Milan going 4 of 7 from 3. I mean, who was the other one? Curtis Jones was the only other one to make a 3. It was Curtis and Milan in this game. First off, that's nuts. Secondly, That is a prime, like, I can't even believe how perfectly that illustrates the point that he spreads the floor. 0 of 1 from Jefferson, 0 of 2 from Lipsy and Gilbert, and then 0 of 1 from Nojus. Those were the only ones that attempted it. And Milan and Curtis were the only ones to make threes. So if you want, that's actually almost inarguable from anyone saying that he doesn't spread the floor. Clearly he does. So that impacts how the defense can react to what Iowa State is presenting offensively in the half court, right? They don't have to crowd the box, in the box so much down in the paint, right? We can spread the floor. That gives a drive, a kick. It opens everything up offensively. What Iowa State can do, and that's kind of how they run their offense. It is wow. I actually cannot believe that. I hadn't seen that. I saw the 4 of 7, and you turn to the first 3 of the game, which I'll talk about in a second. And you immediately think, okay, he's spreading the floor. Then you notice Curtis was the only other one to shoot, to make a 3, not to shoot a 3, but to make a 3. Boom, perfectly illustrates the point. Now, I will mention, I like the way that he was implemented into this game. With that first 3-point attempt, he said, I wanted that one, and TJ was kind of in that same boat. He was talking about it in the post game, and he was basically saying we wanted him, to feel like he not deserves to take that shot, but almost like we've got him, right? We're here for him. We've got his back, and I think that's what this team does so well. I also think, outside of the actual numbers of minutes, and when you take a look at the numbers to show that Milan spreads the floor, there was a non-numbers based boost that Iowa State got from having Milan on the floor. Now, granted, you're back at home. You're facing a TCU that you should beat. The crowd was popping. College game day was there. There was tents out there. That had been Friday night. Ames was electric, as almost every other game, for sure. But that's going to bring some juice to the boys, yes. But I've been talking about this team needs a spark. This team needs something to base, this bounce back off of. It feels like they're missing something right now. We're just searching for something to put an anchor down on, and this was the perfect time. Milan coming back in this game with the environment around this game and it being at home, the team had juice, and it was exactly obviously it came at the exact right time. Like I said, this is not a game I expected to circle when I took a look at the entire schedule for Iowa State this year, but it became one of, in my opinion, the most important games, positive-wise, that you could really imagine. If you want to argue negatively, I think Arizona was the biggest one just because of how rough that loss was. And it felt like there was a hangover for the Kansas State game in a way. And obviously there's implications of every game, right? But either, this TCU game was huge. Milan coming back. I think that this pushes Iowa State into that contender title kind of, tier again. I do think what he does, not only actual production on the floor, but the way other teams have to respond. Obviously, with 2 turnovers helping with the points in transition, I just think he brings too much to the table for this team. And then the juice on top of that, it's coming at a great time. As I mentioned, we need this team to start building some momentum. We'll talk about that here in a minute. After obviously this win over TCU, came at the exact right time, though. Certainly did. So shout out to Milan Momchilovich for the rehab he did. Screw in the hand. That's crazy. I don't have any screws in my hands. So I don't know how well I'd be able to shoot a basketball. Maybe it would make me better, but highly, highly unlikely, just in my personal case. So shout out to Milan for the rehab he did. Got back out on the floor, helps Iowa State get that win over TCU. Now let's take a closer look at that win over TCU. I'll break that down in depth coming up right after this. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Iowa State takes down TCU to get their win and break the losing streak. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's talk about it. Milan is back, baby, and I couldn't be more excited for what this means for the future. But let's talk about the present and or I guess this is the recent past. Iowa State 82, TCU 52. This game, beyond electric. Had boots on the ground in the arena, in the Coliseum, if you will. And reports were getting directly to me that the pop that was heard for Milan's return was almost ear-shattering. I mean, this place was absolutely electric. And then obviously the whole game kind of went in Iowa State's favor. You get a 30-point win. That's going to boost some confidence. 42 in the first half, 40 in the second. And a few minutes at the end of the game for some backups. As I mentioned in the first segment, obviously the starters only getting 28 minutes. That was helped, yes, by the backups being able to come into this game. But either way, still reduction in minutes for the starters. And we love to see, JT Rock, Cade Kelderman out there, the future, I suppose, kind of getting out on the floor. The game as a whole, Iowa State really kind of handled business, did what they had to do. It never really felt close, to be completely honest. TCU didn't have a single player with double-digit points. That's not great. I'm not going to lie. From TCU's perspective, as a team, your leading scorer for Iowa State was a tie between Milan Momcilovic, the returner, at 14, and Deshaun Jackson with 14, and Joshua Jefferson had 13 of his own. Then Keyshawn Gilbert brings 8. Those are your starters. However, what's kind of crazy here, I just mentioned starters, right? 13, 14, 14, 8 from Keyshawn Gilbert. You bring 1 from Tamin Lipsey. Well, that doesn't really add up to the 82 points that were scored. Well, that's because we have a man coming off the bench by the name of Curtis Jones, who chipped in another 24 of his own. We didn't even talk about this in the first segment, but the effect of the rotation that Milan has bringing Cujo off the bench is a substantial one. And 24 points is nothing to scoff at. 5 of 6 from 3, 7 of 11 from the floor as a whole, 28 minutes. Got 5 more at the line. What a game for Curtis Jones. Obviously, was able to kind of, in my opinion, feel that kind of role coming back in. Feels like maybe there's less pressure there in that role. And then you're able to kind of flow with it more. I don't know, just the addition of Milan, we talked about it significantly, at a large number of words, I guess, let's put it that way. It was a big deal for this team. And more than that, I'm looking at this game was a huge win. I mentioned that this is a huge momentum getter, a necessary one. Looking at their last few games, obviously we've talked about it, but let's just quickly recap. Lost to West Virginia. Then you get 2 in a row at UCF and Arizona State. Then you lose 3 in a row. Arizona, Kansas State, Kansas. Skid. Just everything was going wrong. Okay, the vibe of this show changed dramatically. Obviously, the vibe around Ames changed dramatically. It could be felt. You could smell it when you left your apartment or your house in the morning and came back from work in the evening. It was very clear. Then go up against TCU at home, college game day in town. You win by 30 points, almost like all seems to be right again. Okay, let's put it that way. Obviously, with Milan back in the lineup, that's going to add another piece to that puzzle. Now, what remains for Iowa State? You've got a couple of games here, 3 games before you go to a number 5, Houston, on the road. This is where Iowa State needs to build their momentum back. I'm not going to look past Houston. I'm really hardly even looking past UCF. But to take the binoculars out and get just a little bit down the road, you got to realize that, yes, we have Houston remaining. We got Arizona remaining. Honestly, Kansas State, didn't expect that to be one that's remaining, but we face them again with some redemption there, and we'll be on the road for that one. Then you got tournaments after that, Big 12 and March Madness tournaments. So it's time to turn it on. Okay, Milan is now back, and this team is going to be able to find that chemistry that they had to start this year. I don't think that's going to take very long. I don't even know if it took them a full game. Okay, but I do think that kind of everyone's settling back into their roles, knowing how many minutes, what does it feel like to play less minutes and go a little bit harder. You find that groove. I think that's a great spot for this team. And the opponents that they're facing, UCF, Cincinnati, Colorado, all very gettable games here. You're not going through a gauntlet that was in Arizona and a Kansas, both on the road, almost back-to-back games. After playing Kansas just a few games prior to that, Arizona State, feisty in that one as well. Kansas State, you get at home. Excuse me. That was a tough stretch of games, especially to be missing Momchilovich, right? This is a bad time for that to all go down. It was a perfect storm for Iowa State to face a ton of adversity. And the question became, how does Iowa State handle adversity? Right. And now we're in the spot where we find out, obviously, this TCU game was a good sign. This is a great sign, actually. You win by 30 at home. Feels like we're there. Obviously, not getting complacent by any means, but that's a good sign. I didn't want to have to win this by one or even worse, lose, right? So a big statement win at home. You're facing TCU, who is now 12-11. You move to 18-5, 8-4 in the conference. At this point, we're just getting mojo. Okay, we're building things, getting ready for those postseason tournaments where this team will hopefully, and I think very well can, shine. I think this team has all the pieces now, especially with Momchilovich back. I got to say, I'm quite surprised that we saw such an instant impact. There was definitely a piece of me, and we talked about it here, where I wasn't sure if maybe Momchilovich, is he going to make like a 10, 20, 30% impact? Are some of the issues that Iowa State was seeing, was that deeper than just Momchilovich being on the floor? Did teams see what West Virginia did and try to replicate that? Did they kind of figure out that they can shut down the inside and force Iowa State to shoot? There's all these different things that it's like, maybe if Milan's in, we see we see a small difference at the end of the day. Numbers are going to look different in the box score, but it's going to be, it's a close one against TCU, or it ends up being like I don't want to say like a buzzer beater because that doesn't really mean too much, but you get a comeback or, something along those lines where it would indicate that addition of Momchilovich wasn't necessarily a huge deal. I think that is not the case. We're clearly looking at a 30-point win over a TCU team that, yeah, they might not be the best team in the Big 12, but they still are competent. 5-7, that's 5 wins, right? That's 5 wins in the Big 12 that they've earned. And you got to respect it. As I said, against Kansas State, you got to respect anybody playing Iowa State's going to bring their A game, especially when they're coming into Hilton too. This place is just full of energy, right? And so, I think this was a huge win. This was a enormous win for Iowa State, and the momentum that they can use off of this will be seen just for hopefully the rest of the year. Honestly, hopefully for forever. But this team will only play the rest of this season. That being said, momentum-wise, the women also carried their momentum through their game with Colorado. We'll be talking about that coming up right after this. Iowa State beats Colorado in the women's basketball game that went down on Saturday. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And boy, oh boy, was I happy to see the way that this game went. I think this went honestly about as good as it could have for the women's basketball team from Iowa State here, 86-56. Obviously, we talked about the Cyclones and the men's side of things, 82-52. And the women who played just a few hours after the men were able to continue that trend and almost get an identical score. Kind of crazy there. totally unrelated. Just like, wow, what are the odds? What happened in this one? Well, it honestly kind of was just Iowa State's game. There was a little bit in the I guess kind of the beginning of the fourth where it was kind of close, but that was still like a 20-point game. Really from the jump, this was Iowa State's basketball game, and it was fun to see. As far as scoring goes, you had 12 from Addie Brown, 12 from Ariana Jackson, 12 from Emily Ryan, 5 from Kelsey Jones, and then Audie Crooks. I mean, she's going to Audie Crooks. Gets you 33. Okay. 5 from Reagan Wilson, 5 from Sydney Harris, and another 2 from Alyssa Williams. Gets you your total of 86. Colorado, we held them to, or Iowa State rather held them to only two opponents, I guess, 2 players with more than 10 points. Joanna Tater had 11, and then Nyammer Dew had 15. Outside of that, just a few points here and there. Miss Betson had 9. Miss Weta had 8. Nothing crazy. I felt like pretty solid defensive effort. You hold a team to 56 points, it's going to be hard to find a major contributor in that. Now, what did I really, really like about our offensive production here was obviously you score 86 points, there's more opportunities for points to be spread across the box score. That's pretty self-explanatory. But I had mentioned multiple times, I want to see this scoring attack spread out across the starting lineup. If we need to take points off of an Addie Brown or an Audie Crooks or whoever ends up scoring, those were the 2 top scorers kind of going into this game for this team. That's fine. I'd rather it be spread out throughout the team, force the opponent to have to stop any one, and you can answer with another player, another whoever's on the floor. I was going to say starter, but not even a starter, because really Kelsey Jones maybe coming off the bench, Sydney Harris coming off the bench in this one. Now, like I said, that was kind of my thought process here. We were able to see that without Audie Crooks really having to see a dip in points scored in her offensive production. She still scores 33, which is a wild number. And then you had 36 come from 3 separate players, all with 12 of their own. Addie Brown, Ariana Jackson, and Emily Ryan. Then obviously Kelsey Jones with 5 points, hit a 3 and a bucket, nothing from the line. Kind of crazy. Only 5 of 8 from the line in this game. Not a ton of free throws, which is, I mean, if you can score 86 points with only 5 of them being completely free, that's pretty nice. 3-point wise, shot 47%, 56% from the floor as a whole. 25 assists on 35 shots. That's going to get it done most days. That's going to help at least. 8 offensive rebounds, 30 defensive rebounds. And I think outside of the statistics, I think that's really good. I mean, that's fine. We can move on from that. 15 and 20 from Audie Crooks, though, is pretty neat, 75%. I think this was a great, really just great game from the women. They played solid. Watch the game, looked like very just clean, a lot of ball movement, getting it in Crooks. And it was kind of one of those where I'm impressed we were able to get 36 from 3 other starters, combined, obviously, because of what they were giving us inside with Audie Crooks. She just had like I said, 15 of 20, no problems getting those buckets. There was a point, I believe, I don't have the number, the time exactly, but Audie Crooks was kind of the stopper of a Colorado run. Now, by Colorado run, I'm not going to say that they were really getting back into this game, but they had a little bit of momentum. Felt like Audie Crooks was able to finally subside, just kind of put an end to that, and keep Iowa State rolling through that one. And then, as I mentioned, to start this whole thing off, this was kind of a momentum game for Iowa State. The win over Cincinnati in their prior game came just after losses to Kansas State and TCU, 2 games that I thought they could definitely have beat Kansas State, but the TCU one is its own deal, right? Then from there, what is this team, right? You need to win out effectively to really get some momentum here. We keep throwing around this word momentum, but we're getting towards the end of the year, okay? You beat Cincinnati, you beat Colorado, now you're back on the road out of Kansas. This was the perfect time to come away with a big win. 20-point win over Cincinnati helps. then 30-point win over Colorado. And as I've mentioned, I think this team is in a great spot. I really do. We're seeing Emily Ryan with her typical 5 assists, but Addie Brown is really becoming a major, major pillar for this team. Obviously, in the scoring capacity that we've seen in the past, but now with 11 assists against Colorado, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, she got a double-double off the assists. That's actually pretty nuts. You kidding me? And then Audie Crooks with a double-double on the rebound side of things. I shouldn't leave that, out to dry either. Obviously, a big deal there. But I like where this team's at, and Emily Ryan being the facilitator, her being back helps this team quite a bit. We talked about kind of that calming presence, that she brings to this team. And this team now at 17-9, 8-5 in the conference. If they can build some momentum here, stack a few wins up, this is very much a team that can make a run at a Big 12 title, or potentially, a Sweet 16 finish, Elite 8 finish. We could see a really strong year out of this Iowa State team. And we're starting to string wins. The way the schedule looks and the way that this team is now performing at this point in the year, it is, in fact, I would say it's favorable for that kind of outcome. But really, Audie Crooks coming away with 33, starting to find kind of the groove in the paint, and the feeds, coming from Addie Brown, and Emily Ryan. I don't know what else to tell you, man. I mean, this team is clicking at the right time. 20-point win, 30-point win. That's 50 points in your last 2 games. I mean, what do you want? You want them to win by 60? That's kind of a lot, So 50, great spot to be in. Great spot to be in. Not that it really matters. I mean, you win by 1, you win by 50. You still win. I understand that. But I'm just saying momentum-wise, where this team's at mentally, where they were at after an overtime loss to a Kansas State and a loss to TCU, that I personally, I just felt like they could win that one. Logistically, it is a different story. I know that game wasn't exactly within Iowa State's grasp, but a number 9 TCU, it felt like a must-win, felt like they had chances in that game. A couple buckets go their way. Maybe TCU misses a few. It's a much different outcome. That's how I felt about that one. Didn't feel like the 13-point final differential was how that game actually finished. But nonetheless, coming off of that one, where do you find yourself? How do you bounce back? How do you respond? We see it now. Cincinnati and Colorado. They'll face Kansas on the 15th. A little bit of a break here for them before that game. And then 5 games left on the year, regular season year. Time to go, right? This is time to go. Shout out to them. Shout out to both basketball teams this weekend for capitalizing huge wins. I didn't realize how similar those scores were until I started to really dive in here. 86, 56, and then 82-52 for the men. That's pretty sweet. Pretty cool. 2 30-point wins in Ames, bringing the heat as we get to the end of this basketball season. If you made it to the end of this episode, shout out to you. If you're not subscribed, what are you doing? We need to hop on that train, prove once and for all that is, in fact, a Cyclone state. And until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.